Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a really fun video because I decided I wanted to do a year-end book tag. I've never done a book tag before and I think it would be really fun to do because I feel like I had such a great reading year that I came up with a list of questions that I wanted to answer for all of the books that I read. And I'm really excited to do this. I know a lot of booktubers do this, so it's fun to participate in. A girl can dream, okay? You and I are right next to my TBR cart with all of the lovely books that I own, that I've read and / need to read. So we're gonna look at some of the questions that I came up with and then discuss, because there's a lot of questions. When I thought of the question, I wanted to do the first book that came into my mind. So it's kind of thought out, it's also kind of just like what I felt in the moment. The first question that I came up with was, what is my favorite trope? Now, if you've watched my videos before, you're gonna know what I'm gonna say. I am an enemies to lovers girl. I love the tension, I love the banter, I love the want but can't have, I love the yearning, and I will love it every single time. What is my favorite micro trope? And it's gotta be Touch Her and You Die. Also, where she's injured or he's injured and they go to their enemy because they have nowhere else to go. That'll just do it for me every time. I know it's gonna happen in almost every enemies to lovers, but I know for a fact that I will enjoy it. I will gasp, I will kick my feet, I will giggle when that happens. And then the other one that I thought of that is super rare, I think I see it more in movies than I do in books, but I had to talk about this because I don't know why it's not discussed enough. It's when, I don't think it's in just enemies to lovers, it's in all tropes, but when she's looking at something, say she's looking at the sunset or a painting, they're in a museum or whatever, and she's like, isn't this so beautiful? And he goes, yes, it is. And he's looking at her and not the sky or the artwork. I love that. I feel like it's not done enough and I want it so bad. I think it's so cute and wholesome and I cannot stand that does not happen to me. I don't know if you've noticed also my Harry Potter sweatshirt. It's Harry Potter season for me. I'm showing my family Harry Potter. They haven't seen it in 10 years. I'm so excited to reintroduce them to Harry Potter. The next question is my book boyfriend of the year. This one was hard. There were so many great men, but I think the one that tops the charts is Kate Eaton from Heartless. It's the grumpy, brooding man, usually the eldest, that has to take care of the family basically, and especially he's a cowboy. It was my first single dad romance too, and I'm not super into that, but when it comes to reading, Kate Eaton is the man you are, Kate Eaton. I wish he was real. If I could date a cowboy, and if I wanted to truly date a cowboy, it would be him. The book that put me in a slump this year. Alright, okay, so there's two. Technically one is a series, but it's the Mind F series by St. Abbey. That series was so phenomenal. I have never read something that put me in a reading slump because of how great it was. I couldn't read for I think 2 months or something after that because I just didn't want to. I was thinking about it constantly. And then one that most recently put me in a reading slump was Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas. I also love that book. It put me in a slump for two reasons. One, I do not want to finish the series. I have the 2 novellas and Nightfall still, but I don't want it to end. I am so caught up in this series, in the Devil's Night series, that I just truly do not want it to finish. And the second one is because it was just so good. I would not have believed that I would give a Penelope Douglas book 5 stars, but I did. And it was so good. All of the emotions that I felt for the Mind F series, I felt in Kill Switch. And I know dark romance, and they're both dark romance books. The least favorite book that I read this year was one that I literally just read, and it was How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. I got to chapter 4, maybe 5. I could not do it. I could not do it. The female main character drove me bonkers. She drove me up the wall. I despise a quirky girl trope. I do not like it. I will never ever enjoy a book if the FMC is a quirky girl or acts like a child when she's mid-20s, early 30s. The dialogue was cringy. It was just not good. It was not my cup of tea. I really don't like how Christmas books just can't have a normal plot line. It has to be Hallmark vibes. The only two real DNFs are Christmas books. The most surprising book that I read this year, I would have to say Bride. I was pleasantly surprised with Bride by Ali Hazelwood. That was the first fantasy, or I don't know if it's like fantasy or paranormal, or I don't really know what category it falls under, but this was the first year that I started getting into fantasy, and I listened to Bride. I haven't actually physically read it. I want to go back and actually read the physical copy because I have the physical copy, but I listened to it on Spotify and it was so good. I don't know why. I was just in the car or I was running, doing other things, you know, but I was fully invested into the storyline. I thought it was the most unique thing that I've read at the time because I have never read anything about werewolves or vampires. Like I was not into Twilight, like reading that kind of thing. So when I was listening to it, there was just so many things that were introduced to me that I wanted to dive more into, but I was scared to dive into, like the Omegaverse. I still don't truly know what that all consists of. I know the rough outline of all of that with werewolves and that whole thing, but there was a time where I really wanted to dive into it, so I read The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson, and that was okay. I didn't really enjoy it. I really did like Bride. Something about like he hates everyone but her, or differences and different beliefs, but they just like are meant to be together. I don't know, something about it I really, really, really enjoyed. And I think if I read it as a physical book, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much like I did when I listened to it. Another one that I was pleasantly surprised by, well, I wouldn't say pleasant, but I was surprised that I enjoyed it, was Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue, or LaRue. I don't really know how to say her last name. That was another book that I had never read anything like before in my life. And again, venturing into dark romance, didn't know what to expect. FMC is a paranormal investigator. MMC is a demon. Very culty vibes in this universe, and so I actually enjoyed it. It was a great book to get me into the fall spirit. Think of like Twilight vibes where it's eerie, foggy, Pacific Northwest, and then include cults and demons, and you get this book. And so I want to continue. There's 2 other books in the series that I want to read. One's about a witch and another one was doing it for revenge. Definitely did not think that I was going to like it, but I really, really, really liked it. The most disappointing book I read this year. This is gonna, okay, these 2 are gonna ruffle feathers because it has ruffled feathers within my friends. The first one that I want to say is Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So many people are obsessed with Jude and with Carden. Now, I really, really, really enjoy those 2 characters. I did not like Carden at first. Then the like last half of the first book I enjoyed. Jude, always loved, but every single character in that book I despise. Like I could not, I liked the world and I was intrigued about the world because it's like a fairyland and she's a human in this fairyland. Other than that, there wasn't really much happening except for like the plot twists. I was shocked. Of course, there are plot twists. I was shocked by them. But at the same time, I'm just like, okay, those were like the best things in this book. And there was probably maybe like 3 plot twists and I was like, oh. And then I would get done with the plot twist and I'm just like, la da 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 da, kind of bored with the book. And it wasn't bad, so I went to listen to the second book because I have a physical copy of the first book, listened to it as I was driving down to LA, and I had to stop. I still have it on my Goodreads as I'm currently reading The Wicked King. I think I need to buy the physical book. I couldn't trust anyone. I hated every single character. I didn't even like Jude or Carden anymore, so I didn't like anyone. I was confused by the new characters that were getting introduced. There was just so much that was happening. At the same time, also, I was driving in LA, and if you've drove in LA, there's so much traffic and there's incompetent drivers down there. So I was starting to get road rage and I was infuriated with the book. So it was just not a good combination. So I think I need to buy the physical book or like read the rest on my Kindle just so I can sit down and truly invest in the storyline and know who's talking, what's happening. But again, like I don't like the characters, so I don't know if I'll enjoy the plot, but we'll see. I want to continue with the story just because people do say it gets better. If it doesn't get better by the end of the second book, then I most definitely will not be reading the 3rd book in the series. But then also a part of me is like, well, you've already read 2 books in the series. Why not just read the last one, you know? So I don't know. We'll figure out when I get there. And then the other one is Never Lie by Frida McFadden. I had such high expectations of this book. I've never read a Frida McFadden book before. Her book series that everyone talks about is The Housemaid. I believe that's what it's called. Or The Housemaid. There's 3 books in that series. So I said, let's start with the standalone. Let's start with the one that everyone talks about, that everyone loves. It's their number one favorite Frida McFadden book, Never Lie. One of my best friends, he is obsessed with Never Lie. 5 stars all around. Everything about it, perfect. So I was like, I'm so excited. So I was reading it. I was intrigued when it first started, and then it kind of fell flat for me. And then when the plot twists happened at the end, I was super confused. The way that the story was told did not make sense to me at all. And I felt so lost by the end of the book because I'm like, that truly does not make any sense at all. Like, it's such a wild plot twist that I would have never thought of because it truly did not make sense to me. There's probably a reason for it, and I don't want to say why because it'll give away as like a spoiler, but I just didn't enjoy it at the end because of the plot twist, and so I think if it was anything else, I would have liked it. I'm still gonna read the Housemaid series, but if I don't enjoy that one, then I probably will not read any of her books. But I do want to read more thriller books. That was like something that I really got into when I first started reading, and then it kind of fell off for me because I was into more romance things. But I do want to go back to my roots and like read thriller and mystery novels, but I was very disappointed in that because literally when you think of Frida McFadden, you either think of Never Lie or you think of her Housemaid series. And I was like, am I the problem? And I just like don't understand it. But reading is subjective, you know, everyone has different opinions, different thoughts when plots are given, you know, everything's different. But yeah, his jaw was on the floor when I said that I gave that book like 3 stars. He was flabbergasted. I said 3 stars is still I'll still recommend it. Books that I would recommend to a new reader. I thought about this because there's so many people that I've actually got into reading. Like a lot of my friends who weren't really readers before are now, I wouldn't say avid readers, but they're really enjoying listening to audiobooks or reading physical books. If you want to start with romance, is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I really enjoyed that storyline, and I really liked the phantasmic, is that a word? Fantasy aspect, fantasy realism, I guess, magical realism, whatever you want to call it, in her books. I do love Ashley Poston and the way that she writes. Or The Dead Romantics. I just love Ashley Poston. Or another one would be Book Lovers by Emily Henry. That's a great intro to her books. And then with fantasy, something that is less world building and still on the romance side is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. If you want to like dip your toes in the fantasy world, I think that's really great to understand also. But those are, I think, good starters for anyone that wants to begin their reading journey. And then you can start going into series. I think it's best to recommend like standalones because that way you can start feeling what kind of books you want to read more of. And then you can start reading series that consist of whatever genre that you like the most, whether it's mystery or romance or dark romance or fantasy or literary fiction. It's always good to read different genres. That's what my goal is for this new year, is to read more genres that I don't usually read. Like this past year I read fantasy more and I read dark romance more and I enjoyed that. So next year I want to read more literary fiction and actually nonfiction and like self-help books because I feel like it's going to call me out on a lot of things, but I need to hear it and I need to process what I need to process in order to grow as a person. Anyways, we're not going to get into that. My favorite new author that I read this year, one that came to mind very quickly was Rachel Gillig. She is the author of One Dark Window. That's a duology. It's One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I was so surprised of how much I enjoyed it. It was my first gothic fantasy book and it's very like magic oriented, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to understand it as well as most people understand magic systems. That's why it's hard for me with some fantasy books when it includes like magic. I tried to read Caraval, I think last year, and I was so confused by the magic system of Caraval that I stopped reading the series. Like I only read the first book in the series, so I was kind of worried about going into like a different world of magic, especially when it's such a prominent plot line for this duology. But I understood it all and I could visualize every single thing that the author was writing, and that's hard for me to do when it comes to magic. So I really enjoyed it. I want her to come out with new books, and it doesn't matter if it's fantasy or anything, like she's definitely going to be a new auto-buy author for me. Going into that, auto-buy authors for me are my queens, Emily Henry, Ashley Poston, Abby Jimenez, which after I read Just for the Summer, she became an auto-buy author for me. I wasn't the biggest fan of Yours Truly, and I didn't read the first one like part of your world. I only remember that because of the Little Mermaid song. And the last one would probably be like Elsie Silver. Anything that she comes out with, I'll buy. Favorite world that I would want to live in / read about. Okay, if I'm picking it for strictly romance reasons, I'm going into the Chestnut Springs universe. To either get a hockey player or a cowboy, my chances are pretty high. If I was in that friend group, if I was living in that universe, I would have such a beautiful, simple life and be around horses, being around nature, literally looking out into mountains. Not to mention a attractive, brooding, or funny buff man right next to me who's a cowboy. I really don't see any cons with that scenario that I just painted in my head. So if I'm romance driven, I will be in the Chestnut Springs series. Now, if I'm thinking fantasy, I'm feeling kind of crazy. Honestly, I really don't know when it comes to fantasy. Because knowing me, I probably wouldn't survive. All of the female main characters are tiny. I'm 5'10", so won't be able to crawl into any tiny holes or be picked up by 6'3" buff men. Also, I'm not, as much as I love riddles and trying to think I would do well, I know for a fact I would not do well at all. If my life depended on giving an answer to a riddle or a limerick or anything like a puzzle of that sort, I would die. I would be dead. I feel like I am smart, but if my life was put in a life or death situation, my brain would not be able to process anything and call me a goner, because that's what I would be. Even if I was a side character, isn't that so sad? Like, I don't even see myself surviving. I mean, if I am a side character, I definitely wouldn't be surviving in fantasy, because also I would have to go through training, and your girl is not. I'm not gonna be doing that. If I had to run every day and fight with leathers on and lift things? What? The only thing that I would want to do is have a bow and arrow, but I've never ever done archery before, so I wouldn't even be good. That's also a problem. So I don't know what world I would want to live in that I would survive in. So I guess we're just gonna stick with the Chestnut Spring series, because hopefully, one would hope I would find love in a fictional romance town. The worst trope that I do not like reading, miscommunication trope. Will hate it every single time. Romance books that have a third act breakup, I will hate every single time. And then another one is the quirky girl. If there's gonna be a quirky girl, I'm either gonna try and push through it or I'm gonna DNF. Usually I push through, but I won't be having fun. My favorite audiobook that I listened to this year. Ooh, that's a good one. Not me thinking. I literally came up with these questions. I would say Love Theoretically. I really like the science aspect of it. I listened to Love Theoretically on Spotify. The whole dynamic I really enjoyed. With Ali Hazelwood, I feel like I need to listen to her books, because the way that she writes, I feel like I would not enjoy if I read the physical book first. So I think from now on, when it does come to Ali Hazelwood, I'm gonna listen to her books, and then if I enjoy the audiobook version, then maybe I'll buy a physical book. Book with the best protagonist. The book with the best protagonist. I would say The Book of Ezreal. I really enjoyed Diana. Her and the Mind F series, Lana, are very close, and I really love both of those women. For sure, The Book of Azriel. I need to read the second one because I really, really enjoyed the first one, and the way that it left off on a cliffhanger, and I tried to read the second book and then I got distracted by another like new release that had come out, so I read that instead, and I just haven't gone back to the second book, but I really, 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 really enjoyed the plot line of The Book of Azriel, so definitely Diana. I love tall representation. I feel like all the FMCs are just tiny little girls, and I'm happy that, you know, the short queens have representation. Us tall girls need to have a little more time to shine, you know? I feel like there's not that many books where the girl is over 5'9". The book with the worst protagonist. One book that just did not do it for me this year was Wild Love by Elsie Silver. It's the first book in the... I don't know what that series is called. Wildness? Whatever that series is called. It's only single dads. And I didn't mind the MMC, but something about the FMC, she was just very childish. Wasn't as bad as like the quirky girl kind of thing, but she was not pleasant for me. That was definitely a hard one to get through because she was acting like a toddler. Another thing is I don't like when authors make children act like adults. I think that Elsie Silver has done that before. Luke, Cade's kid. But yeah, whatever her name is. I think her name is Rosie. Wasn't the biggest fan of her. Oh, and another one was Assistant to the Villain. Didn't really like the FMC. And I didn't really like the MMC either. There was no personality with him. Like, I don't mind a brooding MMC, but there was like nothing. he was giving me nothing. And then the FMC was just kind of like a chihuahua, like a small dog, just kind of yapping all the time with no substance or anything. My favorite genre that I read this year, I think the February me would gasp at me saying this, but it was dark romance this year. Dark romance really stood out over all of them, and I read some pretty good fantasy, but I think it's just because I read more recently, and a lot of them weren't good, but it was definitely a genre that I enjoyed because there's so many different storylines when it comes to dark romance, and even if it follows the same kind of outline, it's just crazy. Like, a lot of the plots are just like, whoa, that is just wild. I never would have thought about that. I think with contemporary romance, I'm just so used to that I like I said, I know the outline, I know the structure, but with dark romance, I literally had no idea what was going to happen. So I really enjoyed some of the dark romances that I read this year. When I first started reading dark romance in February, that was not a good month for me. That was my first time ever reading dark romance, and I remember feeling so frightened and terrified for my life to start reading dark romance for the whole month of February. But look at us now. We're addicted, because nothing will say I love you more than a man that will kidnap. No. He may be a mafia leader. He may be an assassin, but he will cherish his woman. He will never lie. He will be loyal. He would love her. He would tattoo himself with her name on him. Protect her at all costs. Burn the world for her. Who would not want that? The shortest book that I read this year was one that I just finished listening to. I had to get into the holiday spirit somehow, and this was still not like the most holly jolly festive book that I read, but it was Can I Tell You Something by Holly June Smith. I don't know how I heard about it, but I think I just was looking up Christmas books on Spotify and it came up, and it was, I think, 5 hours. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I listened to it, and I also picked it because the FMC's name is Hannah, and I haven't read a book yet where the FMC's name is Hannah, so I was like, cool, I get to listen to someone say my name. Well, it was a very spicy book, so it was interesting to hear something very spicy happen and also hear my name as it's happening. Longest book that I read this year was Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas. That was like 660 something pages. Like I said, I enjoyed the book, as you've heard before. Books looking forward to in 2025. I don't know many books that are coming out off the top of my head of ones that I'm looking forward to. Obviously, my auto-buy authors, if they're coming out with a new book, I'll buy it. But two specifically that I'm looking forward to is Fearless by Lauren Roberts. I haven't read Powerful or Reckless because I'm scared, but also I heard Reckless leaves off on a cliffhanger and I really don't want to read it. I also heard it was very disappointing, so I want to wait to read that until Fearless comes out, because I'm pretty sure Fearless is the last book in this trilogy that she's writing. Another one is the Onks, I don't know how to say it, Storm. That's a part of like The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I haven't read The Fourth Wing. I know it like series, they always leave off in a cliffhanger and they want to continue and everything. So I was waiting for the Onks Storm to come out, which I believe is in January. So I'm like, cool, the series will be over and I'll start reading it. Well, I guess there's 2 more books that are supposed to come out after this 3rd book. I gotta read this series eventually. So I'm gonna start reading it after the 3rd book comes out, just so I know what's happening. And I kind of want to be in like in a dragon-y mood. But yeah, I heard Fourth Wing leaves off in a cliffhanger, so I was like, okay, well then I'll wait for Iron Flame to come out. Then I heard Iron Flame wasn't as good as the Fourth Wing, but it leaves off on an even bigger cliffhanger. I was like, okay, so then I'll wait for the 3rd and final book to come out. But this isn't the final book, and there's 2 more. So I'm like, I gotta read it. Hopefully that's not even a bigger cliffhanger, otherwise I don't know what I'm gonna do. Series that I'm looking forward to reading in this next year, The Fourth Wing. But I want to start reading Shatter Me because I have been seeing this whole year basically a resurgence every like 3 or so months on TikTok of people talking about Aaron Warner, who is the main male character in Shatter Me series. People are like, he's 5'9" and he's blonde, but the way I would die for this man. And I'm just like, what? I want to see what it's all about. I think it's like a 10-book series though, and there's a new book that's coming out, but I want to give it a try because I feel like I'm missing out. I'm getting a little bit of FOMO, so I want to read that. Also, I really want to read the Natural series. That's like about teenagers who are hired by the FBI to solve unsolvable cases, and they all have different talents, and so I wanted to be in the FBI when I was 21. I'm 25 now. I've grown and I've realized my strengths. Obviously, I'm not a runner. I am not a track star. I'll read about it. So I want to read the Natural series. I need to read ACOTAR. I need to read Akatar, just period. And then The Hunger Games. I bought the Hunger Games series and the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This series I'm looking forward to reading. I really liked the movies, and I bought these books probably 5 months back, just never really got around to it, so definitely will be reading that in 2025. New authors that I want to read in 2025. Olivia Blake. I have 4 of her books. I wanted to start reading the Atlas 6 and the Atlas Paradox. And I think there's a third one, The Masters of Death. This storyline sounded really intriguing to me, so I bought it. And then another one that I bought from her was One for My Enemy. Other books that I want to get into, like I've stated before, is literary fiction or historical fiction. And Kristen Hanna, I heard, has some of the most amazing, beautifully written books that's out there right now. And I have The Nightingale by her, and I really want to read that. But Goodreads released today that the Women book by Christina Hanna is the winner of the 2024 Best Book of the Year. So I need to read that. Another author that I want to read is Ellen Hildebrand. What was my favorite book that I read this year? There were so many amazing books that I read this year. Like I said, I had such a great year and I've read 50 books. Oh God, okay, just off the top of my head. I mean, I've done, I think, 2 different videos of discussing my 5-star reads for this year, but for sure, One Dark Window, Two Twisted Crowns. That duology was perfect. It was just so intriguing to me, especially like the heist of it. I've never read a heist story before, so I really enjoyed that. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, The Predator by Runix. That was amazing. I need to finish the series for that. I think probably The Predator, just because it truly is like an enemies to lovers. Like, they hate each other the whole entire book, but the things that they would do for one another, like, I love their dynamic in that book, and I do need to continue on to finish the series, but I'd probably actually say that The Predator is my favorite book that I've read. That or Just for the Summer. Following that, my next question is my favorite book quote. There's so many great quotes out there that could be highlighted, but my favorites is from Just for the Summer. This whole entire book, something that hit too close to home for me. The MMC and his family trauma, the FMC and her family trauma, him trying to deal with personal things, her trying to deal with personal things, them trying to be in a relationship, them not trying to be in a relationship. It's realistic. I just loved the quotes that come from this book. One that killed me because I didn't realize that I love acts of service, not like do things for me, because I feel like I'm such an independent person that I don't like other people doing things for me, but I think it's really cute when people do things for you without you even asking. She was like, "Why are you so good to me?" He said, "Because you deserve it." She said, "No, I don't." He said, "Yes, you do. You take care of everyone in this house. You deserve to be appreciated, Emma." And then she said, "I think I'm just used to feeling like I'm asking too much when I need something." He said, "You're not asking too much. You are just asking the wrong person. Ask me instead." It's so hard to find a man like that. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about, because it's just so beautiful, and I feel like everyone needs to hear this, and I forget this sometimes when things get a little too rocky. This one, like, I need tattooed on my back or something because that has the most space. It says this: "I realized something after being with her, a valuable lesson that I think all the best and most enduring romances have figured out. The love stories sold us the wrong thing. The best kind of love doesn't happen on moonlit walks and romantic vacations. It happens in between the folds of everyday life. It's not grand gestures that show you how you feel. It's all the little secret things you do to make her life better that you never tell her about. Taking the end piece of bread at breakfast so she can have the last middle piece for her sandwich when you pack her lunch. Making sure her car always has gas so she never has to stop at the pump. Telling her you're not cold and to take your jacket when you are, in fact, very, very cold. It's watching TV on a rainy Sunday while you're doing laundry and turning her light off when she's fallen asleep reading. Sharing pizza crusts and laughing about something that kids did, and taking care of each other when you're sick. It isn't glamorous. It isn't all butterflies and stars in your eyes. It's real. This is the kind of love that forever is made of. Because if it's this good when life is draining and mundane and hard, think of how wonderful it will be when the love songs are playing and the moon is out." When I tell you that Just for the Summer is a beautifully written book about raw, authentic love, that is what I'm talking about. This whole entire book is just beautiful. Like, it's so hard to describe or explain without someone reading it. There's grief and so much emotions that are drawn into this, and it's so annoying when people are like, it's such a great summer vibe book. No, I mean, yes, there's summer aspects in it and there's summer in the title, but it is gonna rip your heart out and make you rethink so many things that is going on in your life. And then my last question is my favorite series that I've read this past year. My favorite series that I read this year was the Mind F series. The Mind F series was a great time. It was a sad time. It was a shocking time, and I read it back in February or beginning of March, and I constantly think about that book. Everything about it was perfection. Like, the storytelling, the characters were so complex. Every single one of them, even the side characters, were so complex. It was funny. It was disturbing because of how detailed it was about certain dark topics. It was just such an amazing book that I was crying at the end and I didn't want it to end. Like, I was so sad when I got to the last chapter because I really didn't want it to end. It was just such an amazing book, and I wish that everyone could read it, but I know it covers some really dark topics, and like I said, it is a dark romance, so it's not going to be for everyone. Honestly, every single time I talk about that book, I get sad just because I know that the author has passed away. There's no more books that are going to come from her. I know there's some that are out there and I want to read those, but it's so sad to find a really good author and then know that they have passed away. So I do recommend the Mind F series. It's such an amazing series. I'm going to end the video here. I hope you enjoyed this book. Oh. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe for more videos to come. This might be my last video of the year. I'm not really sure, but I am very excited to see what is to come in this new year. All of the books that I'm gonna read, all of the new genres and the new authors. I love talking about books. If you want to follow me on any other social media platforms, I talk about so many books, so many book thoughts on my TikToks. I'll have that linked in the description down below. And I hope to be seeing you in the next video. And if I don't see you in this year, I hope you have a great rest of the year, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.